guy taught me how to play the guitar. We'd play music for funny at each other.
Just for
It
fun. Yeah.
was goofy.
Like
Nice.
yeah, just good jokes. And then Adam actually dedicated his life to music,
I
became a
got way
music
more
teacher
serious.
and did all that stuff, and I went the corporate route.
So for me,
Sometimes I'll get on an elevator and not even hit the floor. I'm on for the company. Welcome back, one and all, to another Unthink Me. Today we have a little cross episode going on. It's Fake Think Me.
Unthankery. Yeah. Welcome.
It works.
Welcome. We do this thing where we have these really awkward intros. It's kind of our deal. It's kind
They
of our
edit
shtick.
together
see.
pretty good. They
Yeah.
polish up nice.
They clean up good. Yeah. Exactly.
Or topic
Well, this
labeling.
is a little show called Unthink Me, where we explore Ken Wilber's integral theory and other psycho-spiritual topics and intellectual terrain. My name's Adam Lowen, and I just love junk mail.
My name's James, and I mail Adam junk mail.
Oh,
I'm fakery. I really just like to drink tea, and I also like beauty and other art.
so true.
It's amazing.
True. The practice. What is the practice? What is it? What it be like? What it do? What is it? Lately, I've been doing some practice, and I'm curious about tips for the viewers at home, and tips for us on the practice. So Ken Wilber is a somewhat obscure author. He is a bestseller. He's translated into like every language, but it's a pretty niche thing. And it's he's a philosopher and a mystic, and he's attempting to kind of build bridges between different philosophical bases and different spiritual traditions, East and West, and any of the big kind of debates that exist out there philosophically.
One thing I do know about Ken Wilber is that he's got a lot of books.
Yeah,
Some of his books contradict each other.
he's still pumping them out too.
Yeah, and he develops his worldview over time quite a lot. Is that correct?
In a
So-
video I did recently, I said, the key to integral is like be wrong, be a hypocrite. We never said we were right.
Oh, we say that a lot.
Now this is kind of baloney though. Like he has like Wilbur 1, Wilbur 2, Wilbur 3, Wilbur 4, Wilbur 5, and the
then Wilbur
differences
in
between
space.
them are in Wilbur in the hood. Wilbur goes to Hawaii. All the different, yeah. But they're not that different one to the other. They're very subtle changes. In terms of the model, and it's really like nuts and bolts. Like if you started out with his first book versus one that he wrote, last year, you're pretty much seeing the same thing.
What drew me to this is I was very into anthropology in college age, and it is like a science the way he approaches it, in that if it's proven wrong, well, then it's just wrong. We abandon it. We don't try to create the experiment to answer our hypothesis. We go on, and if things change, that's how the world works. The beginning levels are more just like survival. I need to survive. That's all I know is I need to stay warm. I need to eat. And once I become of age, I need to procreate. That's the animal in us. That's proven, and that also matches a time of human history. And then we move up as we individually move up in our interpersonal communications and our understanding of the world. This model moves up as well, as far as what humanity is. The growth of the individual sort of matches the mean of the society throughout history.
It's a
Yeah.
very developmental view of reality, and it's a very consciousness-based view of reality, and that consciousness is developmental in nature. And what the kind of big thesis of it is that these levels or stages of consciousness bring us towards what the great religions and the spiritual traditions express as this sort of enlightenment or gnosis or oneness or satori.
Different
whatever.
vocabulary, but yeah.
Yeah, whatever tradition. And they all they have this overlap with one another. And what we're calling it in this developmental view is this is like a stage of consciousness. We experience it as a state of consciousness, then the state leaves, state comes, state goes. But theoretically, this is where the human race is headed, towards this kind of spiritual epiphany together in relation with one another. almost as though to say this is what the planet Earth is trying to do, to wake up to its own divine nature and to express that with more and more of its energy and time and self. So that's a pretty good rundown on Ken Wilber's integral theory.
You had two questions. The other one was do work, and that one's kind of quick to answer. As you're flowing, you ebb and flow through these stages. One of the things that's sort of a trigger for me and really shouldn't be is people say, I am X. Well, sometimes, maybe most of the time, but we go up and down through level stages
I'm level
and views.
9, I'm level 11.
Something like that, yeah. So when you are doing that, your peak will never grow higher unless you go to your valley and figure out what's bringing you back to that valley. What sort of constraint brings you back down? Again, I don't want to say up and down, but there's not a whole lot of ways to describe it without this sort of up and down is very
Deeper, more
visually
complex.
pleasing. We can talk about that. So what gets you to so just using numbers for example, I'm stage 10. Okay, well you're going to be like high 7 to low 12. If you show up to high 7 and really look at it, are there things that you can abandon? It's a clouded view. Maybe you clear the lens and then, oh, I don't even need to be here at all anymore. And then you kind of trend upward, outward. It's just, I like the spiral because it's outward. They're equal but different. So yeah, just showing up and doing work means recognizing where you are and reanalyzing where you were.
Is that an analogy, or are there actual numbered stages that you go through?
Yeah, there are 12 levels according to a current model that we use. The numbers are just sort of placeholders. It's considered a spectrum or a continuum, but there's very identifiable like nodes in there. As James is indicating too, it's actually a pretty sophisticated thing. And when I come out and I make like a video, here's the 12 stages, it's
Right.
not exactly what it is. It's people aren't these levels, they aren't at these levels. There's developmental lines. So like you as a T person may be expressing a level of T appreciation. That's a like Howard Gardner multiple intelligence, a specific thing that you can develop through levels at. Or as a musician, you can go through levels. And as you're kind of noticing here with the T thing, those levels seem to proceed towards a oneness or a satori or some sort of spiritual realization. There's various aspects of the self that go through these levels, and they go through it in this state-wise pattern, a sort of oscillation through states. And one of the worst things you can do when you're dealing with state practice is to take ownership of the state. Because I had this state when I was on some drug, because I had this state at my meditation retreat, now that is me. My ego is that state. I'm a representative of it. I'm responsible for it. That's the danger with identifying these levels that may or may not exist in nature or as human potentials and capacities. And you can make, like, for example, one of the ways I picked it apart is I divided it into 4 stages. You take the 12 and just every 3 gets its own level. So I say personality, ego, psyche, consciousness. That's another way to divide up this spectrum. And there's just hundreds and hundreds. A lot of people have done, developmental stage work. So in terms of actual practices, we are looking at like those higher expressions or deeper or more inclusive or more accounting for more perspectives. And it seems like meditation and contemplation are some of the primary tools that we as human organisms use to access those highest, deepest, widest, most inclusive terrains. James has talked a little bit about he has stumbled into this sort of transcendent stuff through sort of catharsis, through difficulties in life, hitting your head into the wall. I've talked a little bit about meditation and how meditation and dream work and how those have kind of helped me to flower in that sense and to come out as more and more of my authentic self. And you've talked a little bit about tea and your appreciation of tea.
Yep.
And in more recent times, I think that you were saying that you've done some sort of Zen sitting or practices that are more of that nature
No, 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 not at all. I've
entirely.
not done any. I've never done like shikantaza or like nothing like proper Zen. Like I mean, I have stared at a wall before for several hours, but I wouldn't call it Zen because I wasn't doing it in a Zen context. So I liked drinking tea. I had issues with. I started drinking a lot of it, and I started having caffeine issues. So in order to overcome those caffeine issues, I drank tea really early in the morning, and I went to sleep really early. And in order to go to sleep early, I learned that reading something that I didn't care about would be helpful for going to bed, for
Hmm.
making the mind not stimulated before going to bed made it easier to sleep. I bought three books. One was a book about tea, and it happened to also be about Zen. One was a book about woodwork, and one was a book that was in Japanese about colors. It was just like a list of colors. So I just read these books every night before going to bed for about
How
an
are you
hour.
reading the Japanese book? You're
Um,
just
With
looking at
his
the
eyes,
characters?
probably. I'm thinking his eyes.
But
yeah,
do you know the language?
I don't. I know very little Japanese. I
Okay.
don't know it well. I
But
wasn't
you
so.
can
But
read the characters and make the sounds.
I can read some of the characters and I can make the sounds.
Cool.
Yes. Yeah,
Neat.
yeah.
He didn't say it
So
was a
the
Japanese book on like shipbuilding. It was a book on colors. It wasn't,
yeah.
a collegiate level textbook.
Yeah, yeah, it was just colors, color combinations. It was a pretty simple book. I mean, the colors were mostly all you could look at, and then names of the colors and how they're
That's pretty
combined.
cool.
But also a book on woodworking, and I was reading specifically to calm the mind so I can go to bed. So I wasn't trying to pay attention to the book. The reason why I had the Japanese book was to kind of solidify that was I wasn't trying to read it to get any information. I was reading the woodworking book, for example, and I don't care about woodworking. I have no interest in woodworking at all. So I was just learning about like what specific wood has this specific allergen if you agitate it in this particular way, and then
Mhm.
you have to sand it and all this stuff I did not care about. I just wanted to do something, some activity to do before going to bed. And one of the books happened to be about tea, and it had koans in the book. And I'm reading these koans. Are you familiar with koans? You guys know what
Yeah.
koans are?
No, I'm not.
So they are Zen stories, generally with two Zen people interacting and doing something that's Zen related. And I'm saying all that in a vague way because
Sure.
there are different ways of interpreting it, which I learned later on. But as I was reading it initially, it was just these weird stories of people interacting with each other in weird ways. But I wasn't trying to pay attention or trying to understand it. I was just reading it and I was reading it aloud so that I can go to sleep. So I read through all these books, and then one day I saw a Zen lecture on YouTube about koans. And the person was describing certain koans, and he was saying how difficult they were to understand. But to me, they were very easy to understand because this is my own interpretation. I
You
had
go to
been
sleep
reading
to this stuff.
koans. Yeah, yeah, exactly. I'd been reading koans for several months at the time, not trying to understand them, but I'd just been sitting with like it's hard to even describe what I'm just reading these things aloud, and they just kind of naturally do the thing in the mind.
Mhm.
And then whenever I actually confronted the koans, they made a lot of sense to me. So then I got interested in koans and in reading more koans with some focus and intent. Eventually, I started to meditate before going to bed instead of reading, and it just came really easy to me. And it did shift.
Is there one in particular that kind of stands out in memory as one that you could share?
Oh gosh, there's so many.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
like
kind of tough to recant them. They're so well done in their own, context.
yeah, and another thing is a lot of them have a lot of associations with other ones.
Hmm.
They try to make them kind of nested. The quintessential one, the kind of typical one, I'll kind of abbreviate it. It's a Zen monk is asking a Zen master, "Are dogs conscious?"
Mhm.
And the Zen master says no, and that's the koan. The kind of background context with it is that generally most Buddhists have the understanding that all things are conscious. So the Zen monk knows that all things are conscious. He perhaps read it in one of the sutras and is asking for confirmation from the Zen master. And the Zen master says that dogs are not conscious. That's like
In some translations, it's does a dog have Buddha nature, which yeah,
right.
consciousness, and then the answer is moo.
Moo. Yeah. It's a fancy word for no. Yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of neat. Cool. And so so then you say when you've replaced that reading with a sort of meditation, which is this contemplation of koans or just paying attention, immersion in senses, breath, or
So at first I just did it with nothing. I would just sit in the dark for an hour before going to bed. Wasn't even trying to meditate, just sitting in the dark. And then at some point I started doing noting. So Shinzen Young style noting.
I don't know that one. What is that?
It's saying aloud or quietly, just saying what's happening. So you can say
Okay.
uh, pretty much dividing your sensory experience into seeing, hearing, or feeling.
Yeah.
You could go further. I like to go further sometimes too. But just if you're sitting down, you say feeling if you feel something, or you say hearing if you hear something, say seeing if you see something. And you just do that for about an hour.
That's I've done that to go to sleep before. I think that's pretty good. It was a pretty Western practice. It's like you go 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Five things you see, five things you hear, just and you just keep going down the list. Five things you feel, and you kind of run out, and you have to get more and more subtle, and you have to listen
Right.
so much harder until there's a sort of like a little closer to emptiness and just like immersion. And
Yeah.
that is what I use though to shut myself up. When you got that your arguing mind on, you got you're just going full blast with the thinking and the chattering mind.
Yeah.
Use that as the suppression of that. It's very inward, and that exercise is like focused outward. It's like it's immersion in the environment, kind of almost like nature mysticism.
Right. Yeah.
But
And I like to pay attention to the senses. That appeals to me quite a lot. And it helped for drinking tea because there are a lot of sensory things that happen while drinking tea. But eventually I kind of transitioned. At some point, I learned about meditation. I learned different techniques. I started doing a lot of jhana meditation. Probably that was the main thing that I was into, jhana, for a long time.
and do you do this like in bed before bed, or do you do this like in a sitting kind of
I would
sitting upright kind
sit,
of thing?
I would sit like I'm sitting on the floor right now on a cushion in the dark.
And then you're kind of focusing on like a color or like your breath or everything or your thoughts? I'm
Or you
vaguely
mean for,
familiar with genres, but not too super.
oh, okay. Yeah. For jhanas, yeah, pretty much. I mean, you can really do anything. It doesn't really matter what you start with.
It's like
Breath is
single
like,
point of focus. Or,
yes, yes, yes. But you start with the breath or anything really. And then eventually there's going to be like this, for me, there's like a tingling across the body. And then
mhm.
just pay attention to that. And eventually the tingling goes away and the body goes away too. And you pay attention to that. And then colors might happen and you pay attention to those. And then there may be other things that go on. But that's the start.
Very quickly before we continue to dive into that, what is your steeping water temperature?
I steep my water. It's usually between 92 and 99. I'm using hotter temperature today, like 98 degrees.
For speed?
Um, yeah, and I just like this tea is a bit harsh, and I like the harshness of it, so I want it to come out a bit more. It's
I
got a
think that
astringency.
oof. I think
Sorry,
that
go ahead.
the genres are associated. I'm not sure, but associated with Theravada, right? Theravada Buddhism.
Yes,
And
yes,
it's like a numbered thing. It's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Like jhana is like as a state structure progression, I believe. And
yep.
so there's sort of recognizable milestones in that practice. That like I think that I was trying to make it to like the second one or something like that as I was playing around with it. And I think that that's kind of where you're at, that single pointed focus where there's just nothing in your awareness but the thing you're focusing on. Is
Yeah.
that something like that? Yeah, something like
Yeah,
that.
yeah. Yeah, that's about right.
And I wanted to kind of bring this up too, just as like a talking point. With the integral thing, you really take in a lot of different approaches to meditation. And I feel like that can get messy because so much of meditation, Zen, Theravada, it's all about this like, don't clutter it up, just do this one simple thing forever and ever and ever. And so if I'm doing like yoga breath work and I'm doing like Kundalini and I'm doing Zen and I'm visualizing and I'm doing affirmations, at a certain point, it's like I'm just thinking. I'm just doing this really complicated practice that's like not really very meditative anymore in terms of that elegant simplicity and sort of getting out of ego through immersing yourself in an extremely subtle point of focus. Because all these different practices are so handy, it's really hard for me to just stick with one for a really long time, whether that's in a particular sit or over the course of months. But I
Yeah.
mean, you seem to have a different nature where this is arising from you naturally. You're just kind of being yourself and it leads you towards these practices.
Yeah, that's how it is. That's how it's been for me. I just like it.
Yeah.
I don't really meditate very much anymore. I've more recently been trying to. It's kind of a new development. I hadn't really consciously meditated for a couple of years, but now I'm attempting to do some meditation now. It's become more difficult in a fun way. I just like the jhana meditation. It feels good. So
Yeah.
that's that's why I did it.
I definitely, yeah, doing that type of meditation, there is like a real kind of onset of just physical and emotional bliss, kind of a joyful thing. I've been meditating in the mall in my town a little bit as this sort of opposites, like it's a very like opposites thing. And it helps me too because it's a well lit area with lots of social stuff around, not a typical place where you would do meditation. And so that really helps me to not fall asleep and not kind of get into that lazy place where I'm very subtly like slumping over and not like maintaining alertness. Just having that like kind of social pressure around me really helps me to stay in the zone, I think. But then coming out of it, you're in this just amazingly like lit up, shiny, multicolor. Everyone's loud, everything's loud. There's music, there's shows going on everywhere. I don't know. I kind of think, temples are like that. You have the little room and your little cushion. There's nothing there. There's a smell of incense or something. But then you go outside and there's like, I don't know, a crazy jungle and there's all these big statues and beautiful architecture and, people are doing various rituals and things. Like, I don't know. I think there's maybe something to that, but I'm trying to figure out ways to kind of have a legit American meditation practice.
Yeah, I think it's very different for different people. I mean, everybody, I think there's like you have to find what works for you in terms of what's actually making any impact in your life at a particular time. But I personally, I also like that would appeal to me, like going to a mall, meditating, and then having like the heightened overstimulation almost happening. I'm super into that type of thing. And I'm sure there are a lot of people who are into it, but I'm not sure if it fits for everybody.
I mean, the standard is like in front of a waterfall, like in front of a lake. Yeah.
Yeah.
In
Yeah, oh,
front of a
those are good.
screaming toddler.
There you go.
A cacophony of sound. I do want to say really quickly before we move on. I think it's a beautiful approach of a half shut off mind. Like, because as adults, we learn to mimic. That's how we learn. That's how we do things, is we're mimicking, where children are actually developing things. So you've shut your mind down to, the corpuscular sleep level. You're like in the twilight of sleep, and then you're learning. I feel like there's zero science behind this. I never said I was right. I feel like you're learning like a child would in that state, and so you were able to just sort of absorb without questioning. Like the easiest answer is usually the right one. Like that seems pretty awesome.
When you say that it's been a little more difficult lately, is that just kind of a responsibilities thing, or Just kind of time
Oh
management.
no, oh no, no. This is like I for me, and I have some friends who have gone through this too. Meditating a lot seems to have opened up a lot of different mental. There's like a mental flexibility that's available,
Hmm.
and then they're kind of going through different spaces of mental. There are just different areas of where the mind can go, and they become available over time. And then at some point, they all seem to become available all at once, and they're kind of like simultaneously always available. And then that seems to drop off, and nothing is available anymore.
Oh,
So
okay.
I've been in that. Well, I think I'm in this kind of area where most things are just not available, and or at least they're difficult to be available. I definitely had not been interested in them for a long time. So like the pleasures of meditation just stopped being interesting to me
Yeah,
for a long
yeah.
time. But I'm kind of wanting some of the other effects, so that's why I'm trying to meditate in the last maybe 2 months or so.
That's very interesting. Yeah, and to have multiple people kind of finding that. I mean, obviously, I've done it pretty heavy and dropped off too. I've always felt like the impetus to that was external, just lifestyle stuff. But I think that, yeah, like there's sort of diminishing returns. Like when you start meditating and you have these huge bliss pockets and huge insight explosions and equanimity, and there's a lot of novelty to it. And as you do it more and more, that kind of wears off. And for me, I'm just like, holy cow, do I really have this much time every day to devote to this, in terms of all the many things that I could do with my time? And you kind of don't appreciate as much all that it's doing for you emotionally, psychologically, because it's just kind of there in the background. And if I stop the practice, I'll probably still maintain a lot of that good stuff for quite a while, and it just kind of becomes, yeah, you kind of slough off. I think that's very common, and there's also the kind of dark night of the soul with states where it does seem like as you're at the brink of something truly astounding, something just kind of pulls it away. What the hell? You thought there was something there. There's nothing there. This is nothing. Get lost. That's a
Mhm.
real thing, and it's really disappointing, and it's really upsetting. It's reported all over the place in all kinds of different venues. I was just
Yeah.
investigating Jung's practice, the Red Book, and everything. Same deal. Just all at once. At one point, I can't do it anymore. There's nothing here. They took it
Well,
all and
yeah,
left town.
I'm actually not familiar with. I've never had any Dark Knight type of thing, or I've never had like a strongly negative effect for meditation. So I'm not sure about that. And then the thing that I want, there's actually just a particular mental state that I'm looking for, which is more prone to making connections and noticing synchronicities. So I can work on some creativity things and see opportunities. So that's really the kind of mind state that I'm going for. I'm going for like the manic person who is like seeing everything as being connected. That's
Mhm.
the mental state that I'm trying to get back into by meditating in a particular way.
Maybe in a kind of external scientific sense, neuroelasticity is like one of the benefits of meditation, and that seems kind of where synchronicity and those sorts of connections kind of arise from, is just the brain's native capacity to do so.
Right. Yes. But I'm not looking for calmness or like emotional regularity or whatever. That not very interesting to me.
Sure, yeah.
The journey for the journey's sake is pretty amazing because you'll never get there. You don't have a destination. It
Yeah.
doesn't have to end if there's no, destination. That's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
Well, we got about 111 angel number on the time right when I looked at it. Beautiful. Angel number 111. That means new beginnings, as you'd imagine. And
That's the kind of synchronicity I want to be pointing out. Like I that would not occur to me as being relevant or interesting at all and naturally.
1111.
Uh, Angel numbers is not
Yeah.
something that does anything to my mind, but
Ooh,
if I'm in
what
the
are
right
some
mental
kind
state.
of synchronistic patterns that you tune into? What are kind of some of the What do you catch?
Like if I want something and then I suddenly get it,
The
that type of like
opportunity.
if
Yeah.
I've recently had a situation of thinking that somebody was going to mark my food incorrectly,
Ooh.
and then so like
Yeah.
at Publix, I'm going to Publix thinking that they're going to make my sandwich wrong, label my sandwich wrong, not make it wrong. And then I go make the sandwich, they label it incorrectly, and I tell them that they did it incorrectly.
So we'll just pretend. You were wrapping up the sandwich story. I think that was. You might have
I
nailed it.
think
You
it
might
was
have
absolutely perfect. The angel time was the perfect time to start the story, and they got my sandwich wrong, but they didn't get the sandwich wrong. They got the label wrong, which is even
They got the
more
label wrong.
amazing. Yeah.
Okay. Well,
Yeah.
we'll go ahead
So
and
never had
sign
that
off
happen
on.
before.
We'll go ahead and sign off on that one. Bye, everyone. Hello, everyone. Uh, oh,